Good morning, Emily. Thank you for accepting my invite for this podcast. We obviously saw you in NACE conference when you were talking about career development for rural communities. So I found it very interesting, and I really want to know more details about it and help my audience to understand as well. So can you start introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. And thank you. Thank you. I still have a little bit of a cold from the conference. It was a great time. But I think I hugged too many colleagues and got sick. But
That's
so
fine.
I'm Emily Carpenter. I work at Nazareth University. By way of introduction, I think it's relevant for this podcast to say that I did grow up in a rural area. My father is a farmer. His parents were a farmer. My mom's parents were farmers. So long history of that. But I now work as the associate vice president for experiential impact, overseeing several areas of experiential learning for my campus. That includes the career center, the internship office, community engagement, and study abroad. And so this is something that I'm really passionate about. About 5 years ago, I went back to school for a doctorate degree and decided to focus my research on supporting rural student career development. So it was a nice opportunity for me to combine my personal background with my professional interests.
That's really great. So, because the topic is rural community, I'll dive straight into the first point. A lot of people don't realize there is a difference between career development for rural and urban areas. So maybe we can start talking about what is the difference between these two areas from for the career development.
Yeah, I think one thing to start off by thinking about this is that as a whole, we know that rural people and rural communities have many, many strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they also have smaller networking circles. They also generally have greater financial needs, so they are more likely to have less socioeconomic status, less family income than their urban and suburban counterparts. And they're coming from communities with folks who have the lowest rates of college attainment. So that means they have the least knowledge of and the connections to professions that require degrees. So, if we think about that, then we know that their knowledge of opportunities and their connection to opportunities is going to be smaller. It might be very robust for the ones that they do know, but it is going to be smaller. So fewer people, smaller networking circles, which means less exposure to a variety of opportunities. Um, Additionally, in rural areas, we know that the number and the breadth of industries and positions available are likely going to be smaller. So folks from rural areas often face this challenge, a unique challenge of do I stay or do I go? So if I think sometimes there's an assumption that rural people don't want to be in the rural area, and that is a misconception. But some people do make the choice to go, but I think sometimes that is a choice that they wrestle with, because if they could do the job that they wanted to in their small hometown, they might want to do that. Um, as a quick example, one of the students that I interviewed for my dissertation talked about how her dad worked for several years to get a job at the local prison, and that was not because he wanted to work at a prison, but because that was the industry best known for having ideal benefits, so healthcare and retirement benefits. So, like if you got a job at the prison, then you were going to be set. But it really was that was because that was the biggest employer in their area. Um, so that made me think about, okay, the choices that folks are making when they live in those areas.
I see. So I guess COVID made a lot of impact in terms of people deciding to stay or leave, and maybe more started to stay. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I don't have the specific statistics on that as well, but I think one of the things that we talked about, both in my presentation, but that I've been watching is this the high speed internet access. So
Mm-hmm.
I think during COVID we realized that there are many rural areas that still don't have access to high speed internet, and so connections to their campus, um, being able to continue their education, that kind of stuff. That was very difficult for some areas. So, I think they may have been more cut off than other areas during the pandemic when were relying solely on
Right.
Zoom calls and Teams calls and
Yeah.
things like that.
Wow. I mean, that's interesting to know that there's not internet access across. So, So what strategies have worked for these students? Like, firstly, what's the biggest challenge, and what strategy have worked so far for you in Nazareth?
Hmm. So Nazareth is actually in a suburban area, so we draw students from rural areas to
Mm-hmm.
our campus, and I think, when you're thinking about strategies for your students, you have to consider your own context. So for us, we are welcoming students to our campus who may be coming from rural areas, who are being exposed to new industries, and then they may want to stay for the summer, but for them, having housing in the summer, making that choice whether or not to go home, that becomes difficult. So the more that we can make that accessible and available to them, the better. I think some of my colleagues that work at rural institutions have a different set of challenges to contend with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, but for all of us, really leaning into mentorship and networking efforts can be helpful. Um, we want to provide opportunities for students to see examples of rural people who have either stayed in the rural area and made a life, or who have gone on to do other things. I think that idea of you can't be what you can't see is really important. And we don't often
Right.
think about rural identities when we talk about that. So for those students to have those examples is really important. Supporting experiential learning, however that looks, whatever that means for your campus, but helping students to get those experiences. Sometimes it means, if you are a rural campus, can you create those opportunities on your campus?
Mm-hmm.
So as another example, if you have a student, there's a person that I interviewed as part of my research that was talking about culinary internships and having to try to find a culinary internship for their students, and the students were saying, "Well, I just have like one pizza shop in my hometown. Like, how do I
Yeah.
do this?" So can that student do that culinary internship on campus then? Because there's actually going to be more opportunity for the student on the campus than there would be in the hometown.
I see. I see. So, do you happen to get any issues reported to you from students about how they are not being considered for any positions or getting calls because they are from rural areas? Does that happen?
It hasn't been, it's not explicit. So I think one
Hmm.
of the interesting things about, rural identity and place-based identity is it's a hidden identity. So it's not going to show
Right.
up as obviously, but I do think that, subconsciously rural folks are feeling that, like the student in my
Hmm.
interview who said, I think that people sometimes see my population as a joke, that they think cows and tractors and yeehaw and things like that, and
Yeah.
so she wasn't talking about where she was from. She wasn't bringing it up. She was kind of like downplaying it or hiding that piece of her identity. And we know that in interviews and in networking, being able to
Hmm.
bring your whole self to that is really an advantage. And so when people are hiding pieces of themselves or thinking that somehow it's less desirable, that's
Right.
not gonna help them in the long run.
I see. So, how does the political landscape affect these,
Mhm.
uh, reviews on the students? Is there a change like, oh, you come from this state, and based on the media and the politics, how it's shaping today, is that going to affect their chances? Is that something ever happened?
I have not seen that happen, but I think it is, again, one of those things that people may be making assumptions about,
Mm-hmm.
and not saying it out loud. So
I
I think
see.
one of the things that we can do is to just ask our faculty and staff on campuses to grow in their awareness of rural populations, and to learn both about the strengths and the challenges,
Right.
so that we know that that this may mean less formally educated but not less intelligent, and just saying that out loud, so that we aren't just sometimes we say things that we don't really think about when we say, like, oh, like, I'm from the middle of nowhere. Well, like, you don't want to be a nowhere person. You want
Right.
to be
Right.
from somewhere, and that's just this, it just comes out. It's what we're swimming in. We don't
Yeah.
mean to do it, but then I think it can impact students, their sense of pride and where they come from and ability to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
So for those watching on the who are actually in the rural areas and in the career services, if they need a suggestion on how to modernize career services for the rural areas, what would that look like? The most advanced career services of the rural areas.
Hmm. Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, I would make sure everyone has high-speed internet access, because I think there are so many great opportunities right now, with online training and development, remote opportunities for work. Um, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about AI as well. And I think
Uh-huh.
that really is a great leveling of the playing field. Um, but I would probably back up first and just build awareness, because what I found when I was doing my research is that there are folks who are working at rural institutions who are not from those areas. And so they have been saying things to their family and friends, like, I'm working in the middle of nowhere, things like that. So
Right, right.
just so that they start to kind of appreciate the strengths of that population. So um, that it is something that we start with that awareness, and then we from there we build the support. But there are some things that just making the implicit more explicit. So some how-to guides, like
Mm-hmm.
how to um, find somewhere housing, how to take public transportation, things like that. That if you have a student going to a metropolitan area
Mm-hmm.
or an internship or an experience, what might they encounter that they haven't encountered before, and how can you help support them? Again, leaning into those mentorship and networking efforts, and supporting experiential learning. Those are the things that I would really would love to see.
I see, I see. So since you mentioned about AI, let's just talk about it. What's your opinion on AI these days? So I've seen a couple years ago there is a skepticism about AI, and then now there is more of an adoption and understanding of it. So how is it being perceived in the rural areas compared to urban areas?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm not sure if there's much of a difference in perception, other than there may be a difference in adaptation rates, because it isn't some of the careers and the industries that are in rural areas may not be as quick to be adopting AI. And so we'll see what that looks like. But I think for we out on my own campus, I think we're still struggling with students are using AI to cheat, and we're getting stuck in that piece of it without moving on to, like, well, how can we kind of be part of this new movement, and also use it to help support the work that we're doing. And I think it can be incredibly helpful. I think it can be incredibly helpful in career development.
I see. Can you tell me an example of, I'm really interested in this. Can you tell me an example of how they're using it to cheat?
Well, I think, like, write a paper on X, and you can
Uh-huh.
ask AI to help you with that. And sometimes you lean too heavily on the answers that AI can give you. But so I think that's where I'm hearing it the most. You can put together a really good PowerPoint presentation very quickly on a topic, without having to
Right.
think through that yourself. But yeah, I also think for folks that have struggled with um, learning disabilities and things like that, if they can use AI to help them present more professionally, then
Uh-huh.
more power to them. I think that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so one final message, if you can think of, to all the other career advisors in rural areas, based on your experience and learning, if you need to give a message to them to watch out for, or you look or looking forward to, what would that be?
Well, first, to say thank you for caring enough to learn a bit more about this population and about place-based identity, and to know that it's a thing, and that there are many, many strengths from rural areas that we can embrace. And I think, in terms of talent or new hires in your industries, these are folks who are generally very good problem solvers, very good collaborators, care deeply about their communities. Um, so there are many strengths that the rural population would bring to both the campus and to a workforce. And so I want to like make sure that we get out that positive asset-based view of this population, but then also be realistic about some of the challenges that come with being from areas that have smaller and more closed networking circles
Mm-hmm.
or fewer opportunities to and exposure to different industries. And so, I think our role can be to expand that accessibility, the availability, the affordability of those options and connections for our students.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's all I got. It's going to be a short podcast in general. So we want to make sure that the message is delivered crisp and clear to a lot of career advisors watching this podcast. So thank you for your time, Emily, and I look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.